Welcome to the Operator Signal. Today, I am joined by the co-founder and chief strategy officer of the Provenance Chain Network, Dan McMorris. Dan, thank you for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about the company.
James, appreciate it. So the company's name is the Provenance Chain Network. My background, we have a trust layer to commerce. So think about the transactions that you have and can you trust the claims that are made by the counterparties? That's where we focus. My experience, when you asked about a little bit about me, this is considered a supply chain technology, but it goes broad to commerce. And my experience is almost a 20-year career in supply chains. And as you and I were chatting prior to this recording session, most people define a supply chain as just logistics, right? Trains, planes, and automobiles, movements of goods. And there have been a couple attempts to make transparent these supply chains by digitizing a product. That's not our focus. My experience, and I was part of a team that had to rebuild a global supply chain under duress, and we used our balance sheet as a logistics player to do it. We were a private company. We would have been a top 20 or 30 logistics company had we been public, but we were working for some very large footwear companies that you would know easily by their brand names and their symbols. And we had to rebuild the supply chain, and when we did it, we used our balance sheet. So we were buying and selling raw materials. That completely changes the game. And you're doing it multiple tiers into a supply chain. What that means is you're looking at quality, you're looking at diversion of goods, you're looking at counterfeit, you're looking 4 tiers deep into a supply chain and looking at the people, right? The employees. What we found is that it was really difficult to understand what claims were being made, James, about the products we were buying. It's a real problem. And so, as I shared with you, in 2008, Bitcoin launched. I dismissed that technology, sadly, but later I revisited it when I learned about Ethereum and the potential of blockchain or distributed ledger. And you looked at what that means. So our technology is not a blockchain and we're not AI. We combine the two together so that they function and optimize, right? If you use blockchain, you're almost making public information, things that would be public that are sensitive, and you can't do that. So we have decentralized storage for all evidence. We used AI to evaluate the evidence, and we use distributed ledger as an audit for a credential that we issue. And what we do, James, is we issue the credentials for the people, the parties or the companies, the places, the products, and the processes, all 5 Ps, which is different than the marketplace. It's a protocol. So a couple examples. We do work for our largest area in industry is workforce credentialing. So people, right? And think of nurses or healthcare providers. They have to have credentials behind everything that they do, even to get a job. So we help improve the automation of and the control of the credentials behind people's nurses, healthcare providers in the industry so they can get jobs. That exact same protocol, which when you define this product, James, as you and I talking between buyers and sellers, right, for commerce, you pivot over and it can go against any product. And strangely, the Space Force found us. We did not try to be a government contractor. But they found us and they're like, wait, we need to look down before we hit launch on every bird, all of the fairing and the engine and the rocket parts, nested bill of materials, is it valid? And so we pointed the same technology without changing a line of code at a rocket, and we're able to help that mission. Mm-hmm. Since then, we've been now moved into the Navy has found us, and we're working with the Navy on their supply chain. We've worked with NIST on applying this for processes, which happens to be for semiconductors. So now we can actually we are launching right now the provenance tracking of semiconductors, chips, microchips. So we can look at where they come from and where do they go inserted into because of this approach unlocks new and novel applications that, quite honestly, James, we didn't anticipate when we started solving this problem. We just followed the nature of the problem and let that define the logic of the solution. And that's where we landed with the provenance chain. Maybe that was a little long for you, but in essence, what it is a trust layer for truth about your claim.
It's fascinating, and I can already tell it's incredibly valuable, especially with some of the entities that you're working with. And that actually segues really neatly into my first question, which is around market environment you're in and what you're seeing. Is there growth or tightening? It sounds like there's obviously growth there, but I'll let you know that.
Okay, so let me answer that 2 different ways because we're what's called a dual use technology. So it's government or DoD as well as commercial. On the commercial side, let's just talk about semiconductors. And In that environment, it's not only is it growth, but it's unlocking new revenue streams that don't exist today. And it's a bit above my pay grade because I'm not a semiconductor expert. I am a protocol designer, right? But what we've learned when we sat down a consortium of chip manufacturers and designers and testers and the fabs, they all realized that the information that they can share, it normally takes 5 years to get a chip from design through the fab process, tested and out and implemented into a marketplace. 5 years. And because we can capture this information and protect the intellectual property of it, yet share the credentials, we're shortening this down to 6 months. And yeah, exactly. Now that's not me saying it. That's this consortia saying that's the approach. And the way that they're doing it, honestly, is a bit above my pay grade, but we're connecting players that for example, in the design of a semiconductor. And the tester is 4 tiers down and normally would have to wait 2 years, 2.5 years before they started testing that output. We can actually give them information digitally, then still secure the intellectual property. So they start testing before the chip is even made. And if there's any adjustments that need to be made, they give that feedback immediately. That part of this cycle that is speeding it up, again, so that the value, it's expanding dramatically. Between 10 and 20%, top line revenue for the industry writ large on what they're telling me that they can do, right? So there's a whole nother level of GDP growth if we can connect these players differently. On the government side or on the military side, that too is expanding, but there's challenges in engaging with the government right now. And what we're learning is mom and pop shops need to have their credentials in line. And that's taking 12 months for them to understand the contract nature to sell their product. So what we focus there is helping them quickly get onto contract with the government. So ourselves, we're under contract. And the government looked at our technology and says, wait a minute, we need you to help all these other small, medium-sized companies understand our complex requirements. They're called FARs and DFARs. And I can't even tell you what it stands for, really. But it's how do they get compliant quickly? And so it's an expanding business, but it's really cumbersome, is what I would say. There's obstacles in the way. That side is not moving as fast, is what I would say. They need to go faster, but they're not.
Well, it tends to happen with government side of things, I think, too. But I think that also flows right to the next question, which is where are you finding pressure points in the business? Is that around labor or technology or permitting, perhaps, or the supply chain itself, or capital, or something else?
Well, we're still considered a startup. We're in, this is a big concept. And so what we need to do is scale. Our limiting factors right now are capital and labor. Right? How do you grow fast enough to achieve market penetration, right? So that's where we are at with this. I think largely, yeah, I think that overall it's, the talent is there, right? The capital is there. On the government side, I would say that the cash flow is a challenge, right? Because of the government contracting. And I'll share this, and I've shared it with our contracting officers, is that, and by the way, as I was sharing with you, this technology earned us an invitation to and a participation in Eisenhower School, which was the former Industrial War College. So we went and I went and sat next to all of the government officials that are engaging with small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah,
And yeah, right. And they're trying to engage with businesses, but how do I say this gently? The attitude, there's not a sense of urgency. There's a lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
In a potential delay for a few months to a government contractor is not a big deal, but it could be catastrophic to a small business that's looking for cash flow.
Yeah,
right? It's called the valley of death.
for sure.
And what I would say, James, is that's real. That is real. That pressure from the lack of cash flow in moving fast from the government is one of the limiting factors. And then flip on the other side. How do I scale quickly to deliver to that product when having challenges with the cash flow means I've got to go find capital in other areas, and then the people. So there's your dichotomy, right? That's the nature of what we're facing.
Yep. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And so, what about on the growth side? Where are you still finding growth? Is that in new markets, or obviously it could be along capital investment or talent? But is there any other areas?
Yeah. So AI is a huge thing right now, right? But classic AI has three major limitations, I would say. And maybe your audience is implementing AI right now, right? Because it's such an enhancement to efficiency, right? Or asset utilization is really how I would think of it. It goes from capex to cost. But the three limitations for AI are that it is prone to bias, right? It guesses, right? And it's a black box, and if it can't find an answer, it tends to guess. Those are three, and you don't know when it happens, right? And so that's a limitation for this technology. But when you combine it with this decentralized storage and rules that are hard coded within a blockchain, you don't use blockchain for storage, but you use it for the audit tool and the guide rail. It optimizes AI. So it supercharges it. It doesn't allow for a black box. You show everything. It doesn't let the guess. You have a specific language model, and there's no bias because that specific language model tells you exactly how to apply the logic. And so that right there is the growth opportunity. It's not just answers quickly. It's accurate answers and insights, right? And if you don't get insights, sometimes, James, not having an answer back is more valuable than having a guess, right? You say, oh, I've got a gap in my data right here. That's the growth. And so sometimes it's cost avoidance, sometimes it's asset utilization, but in all cases, it's optimizing this technology so that the clients can grow themselves. That's where we see the growth potential.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know about and could not have conceived of the value that I shared with you in semiconductors, right? That fourth tier to the first tier connection. But that's new revenue. That's entirely new revenue that's not monetized today. That exists within credentialing people, right? Credentialing places or companies. So there's new revenue streams here. But if you add this trust layer to commerce, and that's what we're just now scratching, right? We're just now uncovering those abilities, right? Those market potentials, right?
Yeah, those connections, and you can commercialize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. This is fascinating. Okay, so let's shift a little bit here. You're chief strategy officer, and you're obviously co-founder. So, what forces are shaping your decisions over the next 1 to 2 years? Would you say?
Well, in the short term is how fast can we run, can we build, right? That's where we're at right now. On the government side, as you can imagine, the forces that are shaping us there are the DOW or the DOD's need to surface their supply chain and the credentials within it. And that is, we've got a conflict right now in the Middle East, and they're managing for another one that could happen, a two-front war, or two-front conflict, I should say, right? And so there, I would say, not an inability, of lack of ability to have defined the problem set does not preclude their need for speed and solutions, right? So the next 2 years, we're going to be educating and leaning in on growing with the DoD, the Department of War, whatever you want to call it, as they, that's going to really shape us. What do they need to see within friends, partners, and allies? On the other front, what I would say is let's take semiconductors and controlling or protecting intellectual property, defining it, but then selectively disclosing it. That's going to guide us, right? What information do they need to share to collaborate? Right? But what information is required and necessary to protect? Currently, the marketplace, James, only thinks of collaboration if you can centralize the information so that two parties can access it, right? That's not required in our framework. So what's going to shape us is learning specifically, okay, what do you need to register as your asset? We don't believe in data privacy, by the way. We believe in data property ownership. It needs to be that secure, right? It's not just sharing, it's owning it, right? So you register all data on this network, all data, and then you're allowed to selectively disclose that data to another party. And that's part of our intellectual property that we've been awarded, is the ability to it's called permission consumption along with selective disclosure. So that combination is new.
Yep.
That learning how industries need to configure that is going to shape us dramatically. And I don't know that I know the answers. All I see is the need and the excitement, right, within each industry is going to shape itself together.
I think that's still a pretty solid answer there. Is you know what you're looking for, and it's a little bit of an evolution, how things are going to evolve in this. I'm going to say it's a new world that we operate in. I feel like it's new every week now
Isn't
with
that
how
crazy?
fast. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. It
Yeah.
really is.
I'll say it this way. What we're learning also is that if you think about the traditional marketplace with a buyer and a seller, right? You know, Amazon, right? You go on to, or eBay, whatever it is, buyers and sellers get together. We combine oversight and evaluators with the buyers and sellers to get the credentials. And when you do that, it ends up being this industry owned network in between.
Mm-hmm.
Industry defines the rules themselves. So they will own, it's like a network, it's like a utility function, right? A utility, a cooperative. They'll own this network and they'll figure out the rules themselves. How they define the industries and how they define the rules has been fascinating so far to see, right? We've only engaged in a couple, but that right there is going to define the next 2 years for us in terms of
Yeah,
growth.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Again, this is fascinating. All right, last question for time.
All right.
What do you see coming, or what do you think comes next for private company operators like yourself here in DFW?
Well, full disclosure, I am new to DFW. As you and I chatted, I'm a new resident as of a year ago. Looked and just saw the growth that's happening here is off the charts. Not only DFW, Texas, largely. I know this is a focus of DFW, but you start thinking about the new industries that are moving into Texas, right? You think about the entertainment industry, you think about the financial industry, supply chain and logistics, advanced manufacturing is going to be huge because
It is.
that definition, right? It could be 3D printing, could be remote management, it could be accelerated assembly. All sorts of things would be defined underneath advanced manufacturing. I think that is here, and then you've got workforce. The credentials of the workforce crosses every industry, and the people coming here need have the skills that need the jobs. The matchmaking is going to be the huge thing for DFW over the next, gosh, I mean, you call it a decade, honestly. But those are the areas that I see here that if you have a solution in any of those areas, right, any of those industries, boy,
You're going to
that's
win.
valuable. And I'm just now on a panel, an oversight group, or a working group, but it's combining the universities in the area in DFW, focused on logistics. DFW is the fourth largest logistics hub in North America, soon to be the third. And that right there has a whole bunch of issues, right? My experience in 20 years of supply chain and logistics, right? If you've got solutions there, that is going to be incredibly valuable because you're going to have all sorts of new infrastructure. And you start talking about digital transfer of information on logistics, boy, now you're starting to unlock huge value.
Yeah.
So anyway, any of those areas, James, is where I would say DFW or small, medium-sized companies in this area, if you've got a solution in those areas, wave your flag, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Did
Dan,
I understand the question correctly, by the way?
yeah, you're on the money for sure. I think yeah, that's well put, and I gotta thank you for your time and the insights that you shared. We're gonna have to definitely talk offline some more, but for those of you that are watching, I hope you found this as valuable as I do. And to find more episodes of the Operator Signal, you can follow along on YouTube or connect with me on LinkedIn. Dan McMorris, thank you, sir.
All right.